The engine of the black Mercedes gasped like a wounded animal. Marina Albright gripped the steering wheel tightly, watching the dashboard light up with red alerts. Beside her, sitting in silence, Sophia looked out the window with that expression her mother knew all too well, resignation mixed with a distant spark of hope that refused to die completely. Industrial Avenue was almost empty that Thursday afternoon. Marina was desperately searching for a garage when she spotted a faded sign, St. Joseph's Garage, General Mechanics. The peeling paint and simple facade were nothing like the standard of service she usually hired, but there was no choice. The car was starting to smoke. She parked in front of the rusty iron gate. Through the opening, she could see a man in blue overalls bent over the engine of an old truck. He was around 40, with dark hair and a few grey strands at his temples, and he worked with a concentration that seemed to isolate him from the outside world. Marina stepped out of the car with the authority of someone accustomed to solving billion-dollar business problems. Sophia remained in the passenger seat, motionless. The robotic orthosis covering her legs from hip to foot gleamed under the sunlight, a monument of German technology that had cost more than most houses in that neighborhood. The mechanic looked up when Marina clapped her hands to get his attention. He wiped his hands on an old rag and walked to the gate with slow steps, assessing the Mercedes with a technical gaze. "My car is overheating," Marina said bluntly. "I need you to take a look at it now. I have an important meeting in 2 hours." The man nodded silently and opened the gate. Marina signaled for her to drive the vehicle in. As she parked in the cracked concrete yard, she noticed a girl of about 10 sitting on a wooden stool near the entrance of the garage. The girl was reading a thick book, oblivious to the noise of tools and engines. Her brown hair was tied in a messy ponytail, and she wore a school uniform with grease stains on the sleeves. He introduced himself as Gabriel Stone as he opened the Mercedes hood. His hands were calloused and marked by small scars, but they moved with surgical precision among the engine components. Marina watched him with ill-disguised impatience, checking her cell phone every 30 seconds. Sophia remained in the car. Gabriel cast a quick glance in her direction but said nothing, focused on the diagnosis. After a few minutes, he stepped away from the engine and wiped his hands again. "The water pump is leaking," he explained in a calm voice. "I'll need to replace it. I have the part here, but it will take at least an hour and a half." Marina sighed heavily, mentally calculating if she could reschedule the meeting. "All right, do the work." She returned to the car to get her purse and help Sophia out. The 22-year-old moved with difficulty, each gesture controlled by the orthosis that emitted small mechanical sounds with every adjustment. Marina held her daughter's arm with excessive care, the kind of attention that revealed years of unresolved guilt. Sophia managed to position herself in the foldable wheelchair Marina took from the trunk. The orthosis remained locked on her legs, rigid like armor. "Mum, I'm fine," Sophia murmured when Marina tried to adjust the wheelchair's seatbelt for the third time. Gabriel observed the scene for an instant before returning his attention to the engine. But there was something different in his gaze, a spark of recognition that went beyond simple curiosity. He knew that kind of equipment. He knew it very well. The girl who was reading near the entrance closed her book and approached. "Dad, can I show my drawing to the lady?" She pointed shyly at Sophia. Gabriel hesitated, but Sophia smiled. The first genuine smile Marina had seen on her daughter's face in weeks. "Of course you can show it." The girl, who introduced herself as Isabella, ran into the garage and returned with a worn notebook. The pages were full of drawings of birds, airplanes, and flying machines of all kinds. Sophia leafed through the notebook with real interest, asking questions about each illustration. "You like airplanes?" Sophia observed. "My dad and I watch documentaries about aerospace engineering every Friday," Isabella replied enthusiastically. "He knows everything about how things fly." Gabriel, who had returned to work under the Mercedes hood, made no comments. Marina noticed a shadow cross his face, something between pride and melancholy. The next 2 hours dragged on. Marina made call after call, rescheduling appointments and trying to manage her agenda. Sophia and Isabella chatted animatedly, the age difference seeming irrelevant given the ease with which they connected. Gabriel worked in silence, stopping only to drink water or check a measurement. It was when he finished closing the hood that the moment that would change everything occurred. Gabriel approached Sophia to inform her that the car was ready, but instead of simply handing the keys to Marina, he stopped beside the wheelchair and observed the young woman's legs with the same technical concentration he had dedicated to the Mercedes engine. "May I ask a question?" he said, addressing Sophia directly, not her mother. "Is your orthosis too tight?" Sophia blinked, surprised. "How do you know?" Gabriel discreetly pointed to the angle of her knees. "The locking mechanism is straining your spine. You can see it in your posture. Do you feel lower back pain at the end of the day?" "Every day," Sophia admitted, and there was a tone of relief in her voice, as if someone had finally noticed something she had been feeling alone for years. Marina intervened immediately, her tone sharp. "With all due respect, you're a car mechanic, not a doctor. My daughter uses the best equipment in the world, developed in Germany by the leading biomechanics specialists." Gabriel didn't seem offended. He raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "I understand, ma'am, I just made an observation, but I could be wrong." Sophia, however, couldn't take her eyes off him. There was something in the quiet certainty with which he spoke, in the way he had identified exactly what she felt, that awakened a dangerous curiosity in her. "How do you know that?" she asked, ignoring her mother's warning look. Gabriel hesitated. His eyes met Isabella's for an instant, and the girl nodded slightly, as if giving him permission to tell. "My younger brother needed to use an orthosis for years before he passed away. I spent a lot of time trying to adjust his equipment to make it more comfortable. I learned a few things in the process." The silence that followed was heavy. Marina seemed ready to end the conversation, but Sophia held her mother's arm tightly. "Could you look at mine?" Sophia asked, and there was an urgency in her voice that Marina couldn't completely ignore. "Sophia, we've already seen the best specialists in the world," Marina argued. "We can't just let a stranger tamper with equipment that cost a fortune and was calibrated by engineers with decades of experience." "But they never asked if it was tight, Mom. No one ever asked." Gabriel remained standing, motionless, letting mother and daughter resolve it between themselves. Isabella watched everything with wide eyes, instinctively sensing she was witnessing something important. Marina looked at her daughter, really looked, and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time: determination. Sophia wasn't asking for permission. She was claiming the right to try. "All right," Marina finally conceded, but with conditions. "You can look, just look. If you're going to make any adjustments, I want everything documented, and I'll need to consult her doctors first." Gabriel nodded. "Fair enough." They entered the garage. The space was small and cluttered with tools, car parts, and disassembled engines, but there was an area in the back, separated by a canvas curtain, that caught Marina's attention. Through the opening, she could see a workbench filled with books on biomechanics, engineering, and human anatomy. There were also parts that didn't belong to cars: metallic joints, springs of different sizes, materials that seemed more suitable for a clinic than a garage. Gabriel excused himself and helped Sophia sit on a high chair. With careful movements, he examined the orthosis, taking notes in an old notebook. He didn't touch anything, just observed and measured angles with a simple protractor. After 15 minutes, he stepped back and showed his notes to Sophia. "The problem isn't the quality of the equipment," he explained. "It's the calibration. The system is configured to centralize balance at the knees, but your body compensates from the hip. This creates constant tension in your lower spine and forces your muscles to work against the orthosis instead of with it." Sophia listened with absolute attention. "And can it be adjusted?" Gabriel scratched his head, thoughtful. "Perhaps, but it would require recalibrating the entire locking system. It's complex, and I don't want to promise anything I can't deliver." Marina, who had listened to everything in silence, finally spoke. "If you think you can do something, I authorize an attempt, but I want a signed contract exempting my company from any liability, and you will work under the supervision of one of our medical consultants." Gabriel looked at her with surprise. "Your company?" Marina took a card from her pocket. "Marina Albright, CEO of Biogenesis Corporation. We work with biotechnology and medical devices. If you really understand what you're talking about, we can make this official." Sophia held her mother's hand, squeezing tightly. There were tears in her eyes, but they were tears of hope, not pain. Gabriel looked at Isabella, who was smiling openly, and then at the card in his hands. He knew he was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross, but when he looked again at Sophia and saw that spark of hope in her eyes, the same one he had seen in his brother's eyes so many years ago, he knew there was no other choice. "All right," he said simply. "Let's try." Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Industrial Avenue, painting the sky orange and pink. Isabella returned to her stool with her book, but she couldn't concentrate on reading. She knew with that mysterious certainty of children that their lives were about to change forever, and all because of a broken car and a simple question about a tight orthosis. The next morning arrived with a thin mist covering the city. Gabriel woke before his alarm, as always, but this time it wasn't out of habit. His sleep had been restless, filled with mental calculations and engineering schematics that danced in his mind like insistent ghosts. He brewed strong coffee in the small kitchen on the second floor, above the garage. Through the window he observed the still empty street. In a few hours, a medical consultant from Biogenesis would be there to supervise the work. The responsibility he had taken on the previous night weighed on his shoulders like lead. Isabella appeared at the kitchen door, rubbing her eyes. She wore pink pajamas with rocket prints and carried her drawing notebook under her arm. "You didn't even sleep properly," she observed, pouring herself a glass of milk. "You were up all night thinking about that lady, weren't you?" Gabriel smiled wearily. "How are you so clever, Isa?" The girl shrugged and sat at the table. "I inherited it from you. Dad, do you really think you can help her?" He hesitated before answering. "I don't know, honey, but I have to try." "Because of Uncle Raphael?" Gabriel nodded slowly. His brother's name still brought a pang of pain, even after all these years. Raphael was only 17 when the accident happened. A fall during a climbing trip with friends resulted in a spinal injury that left him with severely compromised mobility. Gabriel remembered every detail of those years, from the unsuccessful surgeries to the devices that promised miracles but delivered only frustration. Before Raphael passed away due to respiratory complications, he had made Gabriel promise something. He lay in the hospital bed, too weak to move, but his eyes still held that stubborn gleam that had always characterized him. "Gabe, you're good with machines, better than any engineer I've ever met," Raphael had said in a hoarse voice. "Promise me you'll use that. Promise me you won't let other people lose hope like I did." Gabriel had promised. And after Raphael passed, he transformed that promise into a silent mission. At night, after closing the garage, he studied. Books on biomechanics, articles on rehabilitation engineering, physiotherapy videos, everything he could find. The workbench in the back of the garage became an impromptu laboratory where he tested theories and built prototypes he never showed to anyone. Until yesterday. Isabella finished her milk and stood up. "It's going to work out, Dad. I know it will." She hugged him quickly before going to get ready for school. Gabriel was left alone in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of his daughter getting ready, and allowed himself a moment of doubt. What if he failed? What if all the trust Sophia had placed in him was wasted? What if he made things worse? But then he thought of the expression on the young woman's face when he had identified the problem that no expensive specialist had been able to see. That spark of hope was worth the risk. At 9 in the morning, a black car parked in front of the garage. Out stepped a tall man in a white lab coat with thin-rimmed glasses and a leather briefcase under his arm. He introduced himself as Dr. Henry Taylor, orthopedist and consultant for Biogenesis. His tone was polite, but there was ill-disguised skepticism in his demeanor. He examined the garage with critical eyes, like someone expecting to find obvious flaws. "Mr. Stone," he began, "I ask that you understand I am here to ensure the patient's safety. Any procedure you intend to perform must be approved by me first." Gabriel extended his hand. "I understand, Doctor, and I appreciate you being here." They spent the first hour discussing Sophia's case. Gabriel showed his notes, the weight distribution calculations and the schematics he had drawn for the orthosis's locking system. Dr. Taylor listened in silence, occasionally asking technical questions that Gabriel answered with surprising precision. You studied engineering? The doctor asked, genuinely curious. Not formally. I did 2 years of aerospace engineering before I had to drop out. What happened? Gabriel didn't answer immediately. He looked at the framed photo he kept on the workbench, a faded image of him with a sweet smiling woman and baby Isabella in her arms. My wife passed away during our daughter's birth. I had to take over this garage to raise Isabella and couldn't go back to college. Dr. Taylor nodded, respectful. I'm sorry, but I see you haven't stopped studying. I couldn't stop. I made a promise to my brother. Before the doctor could ask more, Marina and Sophia arrived. The young woman was visibly nervous, her hands gripping the wheelchair's armrests tightly. Marina, on the other hand, exuded the controlled confidence of someone accustomed to negotiating million-dollar contracts. Dr. Taylor, Marina greeted. Thank you for agreeing to supervise this. Of course, Marina, but I need to make it clear that if I identify any risk, I will stop immediately. Understood. Gabriel approached Sophia. How did you sleep? Badly, she admitted with a nervous smile. But not because of pain, because of anticipation. He understood perfectly. Let's start slowly. First, I'll do a complete mapping of how the orthosis is responding to your movements. I won't touch anything today, just observe. The next 3 hours were pure analysis. Gabriel asked Sophia to perform a series of simple movements while he measured angles, tested pressure points, and noted every detail. Dr. Taylor observed everything with increasing attention, occasionally making his own notes. Marina spent most of her time on the phone, dealing with company matters, but her eyes always returned to her daughter. There was a tension in her that went far beyond common maternal concern. Gabriel noticed this clearly. During a break, while Sophia rested and Dr. Taylor reviewed his data, Gabriel approached Marina. May I ask a personal question? He said in a low voice. Marina looked at him with that defensive expression of someone accustomed to protecting her territory. Depends on the question. Sophia's accident. Were you there? Marina's mask wavered for an instant. Yes, I was driving. She didn't elaborate, but she didn't need to. Gabriel saw everything he needed to see in her eyes. The guilt, the overwhelming weight of carrying that moment for 11 years, the way she tried to compensate for the irreparable with money, and the best treatments medicine could offer. It wasn't your fault, Gabriel said simply. You don't know what happened. I don't need to know. I can recognize the weight people carry, and I know your daughter doesn't blame you. Marina blinked rapidly, fighting back tears she refused to let fall. How can you know that? Because she looks at you with love, not resentment, and because I know the kind of person who turns pain into an obsession to solve the problem. I did the same thing with my brother. The silence between them was interrupted by Dr. Taylor, who approached with a thoughtful expression. Mr. Stone, I must admit your observations are remarkably accurate. He pointed to Gabriel's schematics. This point here, where you identified the concentration of pressure on the left knee, corresponds exactly to an area where Sophia developed bone callosity. Something we only identified in imaging scans 2 months ago. Gabriel nodded. It's because her body is trying to compensate for the wrong weight distribution. The problem isn't the bone, it's the equipment forcing the bone to adapt improperly. And you think you can correct that? I can try, but it will require significant modifications to the calibration system, and perhaps to the orthosis structure itself. Marina intervened. How much time do you need? Gabriel looked at his notes. If I work every day after closing the garage, maybe 2 weeks to make a test prototype. Sophia, who had heard everything, spoke for the first time in hours. I can come here for the tests. I want to follow the process. Marina began to protest, but Sophia cut her off with a firm look. Mom, please, it's my body. I need to understand what's happening to it. Doctor, Taylor supported the young woman. In fact, it would be beneficial. Sophia could provide immediate feedback on sensations and comfort levels that objective data doesn't capture. Marina sighed, defeated. All right, but with constant medical supervision. Of course, Gabriel agreed. They spent the rest of the afternoon establishing a work protocol. Gabriel would have access to the original orthosis designs provided by Biogenesis. Dr. Taylor would come twice a week for evaluations. Sophia would participate in tests whenever possible. When they finally said goodbye, the sun was already setting. Gabriel stood in the middle of the empty garage, looking at the notes scattered on the workbench. Isabella had arrived from school and was doing her homework in her usual corner. "Dad," she called, "are you scared?" Gabriel considered lying, but he never lied to his daughter. "I'm terrified, Isa." "Why? You're the best mechanic I know." "Because working on cars is different from working on something that is literally supporting someone's life. If I make a mistake with a car, I can fix it. But what if I make a mistake with Sophia?" Isabella closed her notebook and went to him. She placed her small hand on his. "You won't make a mistake. You know why? Because you care. Those expensive doctors, they know a lot of things, but you care, and that makes a difference." Gabriel hugged his daughter, feeling the immense weight of responsibility, but also something more. Hope. The same hope he had seen in Sophia's eyes. That night, after Isabella fell asleep, Gabriel went down to the garage. He turned on all the lights and spread the orthosis designs across the workbench. He began to work, his hands tracing lines and making calculations, while the city slept outside. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to discover something that would change not only Sophia's life, but also the way all rehabilitation medicine thought about assisted mobility. And it had all begun with a simple question about a tight orthosis. 10 days had passed since that first analysis. St. Joseph's garage had transformed into a strange place, where the smell of engine oil mingled with the aroma of strong coffee that Gabriel consumed in alarming quantities. The back workbench was covered with failed prototypes, discarded parts, and crumpled sketches. Sophia came every day after lunch. Marina would drop her off for a few hours before returning to pick her up, always with that expression divided between hope and concern. Dr. Taylor maintained his regular visits, and Gabriel noticed that the doctor's initial skepticism was giving way to genuine interest. But things weren't going as Gabriel had imagined. The first adjustment he attempted resulted in an embarrassing failure. The recalibration of the locking system made the orthosis even more rigid, causing Sophia immediate discomfort. She didn't complain, but Gabriel saw the disappointment in her eyes. The second prototype was better, but not enough. Sophia managed to take a few steps with less pain, but her balance was completely off. She almost fell, and Marina panicked, questioning whether they should continue. Gabriel spent sleepless nights studying, calculating, trying to understand where he was going wrong. Isabella would find him sleeping on the workbench in the morning, surrounded by open books and scattered tools. "You need to rest," the girl would say, placing a blanket over her father's shoulders. "I can't rest, Isa. She's counting on me." On the afternoon of the 11th day, Sophia arrived earlier than usual. She was alone, having convinced her mother that she didn't need constant accompaniment. Gabriel was in the middle of the garage, staring intently at a technical drawing as if he could force the answer to appear through sheer intensity of gaze. "Problems?" Sophia asked, positioning her chair beside him. Gabriel sighed heavily. "I was so sure I understood the problem. The center of gravity, the weight distribution through the hip instead of the knees. It all makes perfect sense in theory. But in practice, something is wrong." Sophia studied the drawings for a moment. "May I offer my opinion?" "Of course." She pointed to the schematic of the locking system. "You're trying to adapt the existing equipment, right? Modify what's already here." "Yes, it's the most logical. The base structure is good, it just needs adjustments." "What if the base structure is the problem?" Gabriel stared at her. "What do you mean?" Sophia hesitated, as if organizing thoughts she had never verbalized before. "All the specialists who treated me did the same thing. They took existing equipment and tried to adapt it for me. But I was never consulted about what I actually needed. They measured, calculated, programmed, and then told me how I should feel." "Continue," Gabriel encouraged, sensing Sophia was touching on something crucial. "The German orthosis is technologically incredible. It has sensors, processors, advanced hydraulic systems, but it's heavy and rigid, and it makes me feel like a robot trying to imitate a human." She looked at Gabriel with bright eyes. "What if instead of trying to fix a robot, you tried to understand how a human actually moves?" Gabriel was silent for a long moment. Then he began to laugh, a laugh of simultaneous incredulity and revelation. "You're absolutely right. I was making the same mistake as everyone else." He grabbed a blank sheet of paper and began to draw frantically. Sophia watched, fascinated, as he sketched something completely different from anything he had tried before. "You see," Gabriel explained, animated, "a human body doesn't move in right angles and fixed locks. There's impact absorption, there's natural flexibility, there's a constant balance of adjustment and compensation. The current orthosis tries to control every movement, but the human body doesn't work that way. So what do? We forget the German orthosis. We start from scratch." Sophia's eyes widened. "My mum will have a fit. That thing cost a fortune." "I know. But sometimes the expensive solution is the wrong solution." Gabriel pointed to a shelf full of springs of different sizes. "Springs absorb and distribute impact. They're light, flexible, and respond naturally to applied weight. What if I built a system based on impact absorption instead of rigid control?" "How so?" Gabriel picked up a spring and demonstrated. "When you step on the ground, your body naturally compresses and expands to absorb the impact. Your joints, your muscles, everything works together. But the current orthosis locks your joints in fixed positions. Your body is fighting against the equipment all the time. And a spring system would solve that? It could, if I can calculate the right tension, distribute the weight properly, and position the center of gravity at the hip as originally planned." Gabriel began to make calculations quickly. It would be simpler, lighter, and much cheaper to produce. Sophia felt a wave of emotion. "You really think it can work? There's only one way to find out." That night, Gabriel worked until dawn. Isabella woke up and came down to find him welding parts onto a structure that looked nothing like the sophisticated German orthosis. It was cruder, simpler, built with materials Gabriel had in the garage. "It looks like something out of an old science fiction movie," Isabella commented, yawning. "The best inventions always seem strange at first," Gabriel replied without taking his eyes off his work. He finished the prototype by noon the next day. It was a skeletal structure that attached from the hip to the feet using a system of calibrated springs and joints that allowed natural movement. It looked fragile compared to the robustness of the German orthosis, but Gabriel knew that strength wasn't in size, it was in design. Sophia arrived that afternoon accompanied by Marina and Dr. Taylor. When they saw the prototype, the reaction was immediate. "You can't be serious," Marina said, incredulous. "That looks like something put together with scrap metal." "That's exactly what it is," Gabriel admitted calmly. "But I ask that you give me a chance to explain the concept before judging." Dr. Taylor approached the prototype, examining it with professional eyes. "It's very different from anything I've seen. Explain the reasoning." Gabriel spent the next hour detailing every aspect of the design. He showed how the springs would absorb impact, how the center of gravity was repositioned, how the joints would allow natural movement without rigid locks. The doctor listened with increasing attention, occasionally asking technical questions. Marina remained skeptical, but Sophia was completely engrossed. When Gabriel finished, Dr. Taylor remained silent for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised everyone. "It's brilliant. Completely unconventional, but brilliant. You've essentially redesigned the concept of an orthosis from scratch." "So you approve a test?" Gabriel asked. "With strict supervision, yes. But I want to do this in a controlled environment. If something goes wrong, we need to be prepared." They agreed to conduct the test the next day at Dr. Taylor's office, which had emergency equipment if needed. That night, Gabriel could barely sleep. He reviewed every calculation, every weld, every adjustment a dozen times. Isabella entered his room around midnight. "Can't sleep?" "No." She climbed onto the bed and snuggled beside her father. "You know what Uncle Raphael would say if he were here?" "What?" "That you've already done your part, now it's time to trust." Gabriel hugged his daughter. "When did you get so wise?" "Always have been. You just don't notice." The next day, in Dr. Taylor's impeccably white office, the moment of truth arrived. Sophia was visibly nervous. Marina held her daughter's hand tightly. Gabriel checked and rechecked every detail of the prototype. Dr. Taylor conducted the procedure with professional seriousness. First, they carefully removed the German orthosis. Sophia sat in the chair, her legs unsupported for the first time in 11 years. There was vulnerability in that moment, an exposure that went beyond the physical. Gabriel knelt beside her. "Ready?" Sophia nodded, unable to speak. He began to fit the prototype, adjusting each attachment point with infinite care. The springs were positioned along the structure, ready to respond to the weight. The center of gravity was anchored at the hip, exactly as planned. When everything was in place, Gabriel stepped back. "Now comes the difficult part. I want you to try to stand up. Slowly, no rush." Sophia took a deep breath. She placed her hands on the chair's armrests and began to stand up. The springs compressed gently, absorbing the weight. Her legs trembled, unaccustomed to the type of support they were receiving. And then she was standing, truly standing, not locked in a fixed position, but naturally balanced. "How do you feel?" Dr. Taylor asked, monitoring her vital signs. Sophia had tears streaming down her face. "Light. I feel light." "Is there pain?" "No." "None." Gabriel felt his heart race. "Try to take a step. Just one." Sophia moved her right foot forward. Her ankle joint flexed naturally, something the German orthosis had never allowed. The weight was distributed by the springs, which responded exactly as Gabriel had calculated. She took a step, and then another, and another. Marina brought her hands to her mouth, stifling a sob. Dr. Taylor watched with an expression of pure astonishment. Sophia stopped in the middle of the room and looked at Gabriel. "It doesn't hurt, it's not locked, I can feel the ground." Gabriel couldn't answer. He just nodded, fighting back his own tears. Isabella, who was watching from a corner, smiled and whispered to herself, "Uncle Raphael is proud, I know he is." News of the success spread quickly, but not in the way Gabriel expected. 3 days after the successful test, an imported car parked in front of the garage. Out stepped 2 impeccably dressed men in suits, carrying leather briefcases. They introduced themselves as representatives of Tech Mobility International, the German company that manufactured Sophia's original orthosis. The older man, who identified himself as Dr. Klaus Hoffmann, had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Stone, it's a pleasure to meet you. We've heard about your modifications to our equipment." Gabriel, who was changing the oil of a pickup truck, wiped his hands and went to meet them. "Good afternoon. Can I help you with something?" Dr. Hoffmann opened his briefcase and took out some documents. "Actually, we've come to discuss a delicate matter. Our company invested years of research and millions of euros in the development of the orthosis that Miss Sophia Albright used, and we've discovered that you made unauthorized modifications to patented equipment." "I didn't make modifications," Gabriel corrected calmly. "I built something new from scratch, using our designs as a basis, which were provided by Biogenesis without proper authorization." Hoffman's smile was now openly hostile. "This constitutes intellectual property infringement, Mr. Stone. We are prepared to file a lawsuit not only against you but also against Biogenesis for facilitating this infringement." Gabriel felt his blood run cold. A lawsuit would be devastating. He didn't have the resources to hire expensive lawyers, and he certainly couldn't put Marina and her company at legal risk for something he had done. Isabella, who was playing in the corner of the garage, noticed the tension and approached her father, holding his hand. "I understand," Gabriel said slowly. "What do you want?" The second man spoke for the first time. "We want you to sign a cease and desist agreement, immediately stopping any work related to medical devices, and we want all prototypes, designs, and notes handed over to us." "And Sophia? What happens to her?" "She will have to go back to using our original equipment. It's the only one approved by the competent regulatory bodies, even if it causes pain." "Doctor," Hoffmann closed his briefcase with a dry snap. "That is a matter between the patient and her doctors. It is none of your concern, Mr. Stone." After they left, leaving the lawsuit documents on the workbench, Gabriel stood in the middle of the garage, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Isabella hugged him around the waist. "What are you going to do, Dad?" "I don't know, honey. I really don't know." That afternoon, when Sophia arrived for her regular adjustment session, Gabriel told her about the visit. She listened in silence, her expression shifting from shock to indignation. "They can't do that. You helped me. For the first time in 11 years, I could walk without pain. They can and they will, Sophia. I'm sure they're capable of dragging this lawsuit out for years. I don't have the resources to fight." Sophia picked up her cell phone. "My mum will fix this." "No, wait." Gabriel held her arm. "Your mum has already done too much. I can't put her and her company at legal risk because of me." "You don't understand. Biogenesis works with medical innovation. My mom will want to fight. What if she loses? What if, because of me, the company she built is harmed? I would never forgive myself." Sophia stared at him in frustration. "So you're just going to give up? You're going to let them intimidate you?" "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic." But Gabriel knew there was something more. Fear. He was afraid to truly believe he could change things, to accept that perhaps his self-taught knowledge was worth something in the world of formal specialists. Afraid to fail, as he had failed to save Raphael. Afraid that the spark of hope he had ignited in Sophia would be extinguished by his inadequacy. That night, after Sophia left, visibly frustrated, Marina appeared at the garage. She didn't come alone. Dr. Taylor accompanied her, along with a woman Gabriel didn't know. She was around 50, with grey hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and carried a briefcase. Marina made the introductions. "Gabriel, this is Dr. Beatrice Monroe. She's a biomedical engineer, a professor at the University of London, and one of the country's leading biomechanics specialists. I asked her to evaluate your work." Dr. Beatrice extended her hand. "Mr. Stone, it's a pleasure. I read about your prototype in Dr. Taylor's reports. I confess I was skeptical, but after examining the data and watching the videos of the tests with Sophia, I'm impressed." Gabriel shook her hand, confused. "I don't understand. Why are you all here?" Marina smiled, and there was a determined fire in her eyes. "Because we're going to fight, Gabriel. Tech Mobility contacted me with threats, but they underestimated who they were dealing with. But the lawsuit, the legal cost—" "Leave that to me," Marina interrupted. "I have an excellent legal team, but more importantly, I have the truth on our side, and I have Dr. Beatrice, who has agreed to testify as an independent expert." Dr. Beatrice opened her briefcase and showed some notes. "I analyzed your prototype in detail, Mr. Stone. What you did is not a modification of existing equipment. It is genuine innovation. Your hip-centered impact absorption approach is revolutionary. In fact, there are recent articles in international journals suggesting exactly this type of design, but no one had been able to implement it effectively. Until you." Gabriel looked at the three people in front of him. "But I'm just a mechanic. I don't have credentials. I don't have a degree." Dr. Taylor stepped forward. "Gabriel, in all my years of medical practice, I've treated hundreds of patients with mobility issues. I've worked with the best engineers, the most expensive and advanced devices, and you know what I've discovered? Titles and degrees don't guarantee genuine understanding. You have something many specialists lose along the way. You truly care and observe with real attention." Marina added, "Furthermore, we're not just doing this for you. We're doing it for Sophia and for all the people who could benefit from this technology. Tech Mobility wants to protect its monopoly, but I won't let them stifle genuine innovation just because it came from someone without the right credentials." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because you gave my daughter back to me," Marina replied, and for the first time Gabriel saw tears in her eyes. For the first time in 11 years, she truly smiles. She has hope. You can't put a price on that. Isabella, who was watching everything from the doorway, ran and hugged her father. "Did you hear that, Dad? You don't need to be scared." But the fear didn't disappear easily. In the following weeks, while Marina's lawyers worked on the legal defense and Dr. Beatrice prepared her technical testimony, Gabriel continued to perfect the prototype. Sophia came daily, each session showing more progress. She could now walk longer distances without fatigue. She could climb small steps. She could maintain balance on uneven surfaces. Every achievement was carefully documented by Dr. Taylor, building an irrefutable medical case. But the pressure mounted. Tech Mobility not only maintained the threat of a lawsuit, but also began a discreet smear campaign. Articles appeared in specialized publications, questioning the safety of unregulated devices. There were even insinuations about Gabriel practicing medicine without a license. One night, exhausted and discouraged, Gabriel found Isabella still awake, sitting on her stool with her drawing notebook open. She was drawing something new, no longer airplanes or birds, but the orthosis he had created. "Why did you draw that, Isa?" "Because it's beautiful, Dad. Not in the same way an airplane is beautiful, but because it helps someone. The beauty of making a difference." Gabriel looked at the drawing and then at his daughter. "How do you always manage to say exactly what I need to hear? I learned it from you. You always taught me that it's worth fighting for what matters, even when it's scary. What if I fail? What if all this is for nothing?" Isabella closed her notebook and looked at her father with a seriousness that didn't match her age. "Uncle Raphael asked you not to let people lose hope. You're keeping that promise, Dad. No matter what the men in suits say, you've already won because Sophia has hope again." Gabriel hugged his daughter, realizing she was right. Success wouldn't be measured in lawsuits or formal recognition. It was already measured in the steps Sophia could take, in the genuine smile she now wore, in the way her eyes shone when she arrived for sessions. The next day, Gabriel made a decision. He called Marina and said, "Let's go ahead with the defense. I will fight. Not just for myself, but for all people like Raphael and Sophia, who deserve something better than the current system offers." Marina smiled on the other end of the line. "I was waiting for you to say that. Meeting with the legal team tomorrow at 9. Gabriel hung up and looked at the garage, at the workbench full of projects and dreams transformed into metal and hope. He didn't know if he would win the upcoming legal battle, but he knew he wouldn't give up, because some promises are too big to be broken, and some dreams are worth fighting for, even when the whole world says you're not qualified to dream them. The hearing was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday in October. Gabriel wore his only dress shirt, a slightly wrinkled item he hadn't worn since Raphael's funeral. Isabella insisted on adjusting his tie, even without knowing exactly how, resulting in a crooked knot he didn't have the heart to undo. The courthouse was in the city center, an imposing marble building that intimidated by its very architecture. Marina awaited him at the entrance with her legal team, 3 impeccably dressed lawyers carrying bulky briefcases. Dr. Taylor and Dr. Beatrice were also present, as was Sophia, who had insisted on attending. "It's going to be okay," Sophia said, touching Gabriel's arm. "I know," he lied, trying to sound confident. The courtroom was large and cold. On the opposite side, the tech mobility team occupied 2 entire tables. There were at least 8 lawyers, all with that look of someone accustomed to winning. Dr. Hoffman sat among them with his arrogant smile. The judge entered, a man of about 60 with a severe expression. Everyone stood. The hearing began with the usual formalities, then moved to opening arguments. Tech Mobility's lead attorney went straight to the point. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of intellectual property infringement. The defendant, Mr. Gabriel Stone, without any formal medical or engineering training, obtained undue access to our patented designs and created an inferior copy that jeopardizes patient safety." Marina's lawyer, Dr. Augustus Perry, replied in a firm voice, "Your Honor, the defense will demonstrate that there was no infringement whatsoever. Mr. Stone created a completely new device based on different principles from those used by Tech Mobility. Furthermore, we will present evidence that his device is not only safe, but superior in efficacy and comfort." The judge struck his gavel. "We will proceed with testimonies. The prosecution may call its first witness." They called a senior engineer from Tech Mobility, who spent an hour explaining the complexity and value of the company's designs, repeatedly emphasizing the years of research and millions invested. Then, they called a German doctor via video conference, who questioned the safety of clinically untested devices. When it was the defense's turn, Dr. Augustus called Dr. Beatrice Monroe to the stand. She took the oath and sat with a confident posture. "Dr. Monroe, could you tell us about your credentials?" She recited an impressive resume. 3 decades of experience in biomedical engineering, over 50 articles published in international journals, consulting for medical companies worldwide. "And what is your assessment of the device created by Mr. Stone?" Doctor. Beatrice looked directly at Gabriel before answering. I had the opportunity to examine the prototype, the calculations, and the practical implementation in detail. And I can state without any doubt that Mr. Stone created something truly innovative. His impact absorption system, based on calibrated springs and centered at the hip, represents a fundamentally different approach from that used by Tech Mobility. Tech Mobility's lawyer stood up to object. With all due respect, Doctor, Mr. Stone does not have adequate training. How can someone without a degree create something that specialists with decades of study could not? Dr. Beatrice smiled. That is precisely the wrong question. The correct question would be, why couldn't specialists with decades of study see a solution that was right in front of them all along? She turned to the judge. Your Honor, the history of innovation is full of examples of people who, coming from outside the academic establishment, managed to see problems in new ways. Mr. Stone was not limited by conventional paradigms. He observed, learned, and applied practical mechanical knowledge brilliantly. But doesn't this put patients at risk? Tech Mobility's lawyer insisted. On the contrary, Tech Mobility's device, though technologically sophisticated, caused chronic discomfort to the patient. Mr. Stone's device eliminated that discomfort. If there is risk here, it comes from continuing to use inadequate equipment simply because it comes from established sources. The testimony lasted 2 hours. Dr. Beatrice systematically dismantled every technical argument of the prosecution, demonstrating not only that Gabriel's work was original, but that it represented a significant advance in the field. When she stepped down from the stand, Gabriel noticed that several of Tech Mobility's lawyers seemed less confident. Dr. Taylor was called next. He presented detailed medical reports comparing Sophia's condition before and after using Gabriel's prototype. The evidence was undeniable. Complete pain reduction, improved range of motion, increased physical endurance. And regarding safety, Dr. Taylor, asked Dr. Augustus, I supervised every test personally. Mr. Stone's device is not only safe, but surpasses the safety standards of the previous equipment. There was not a single complication, no significant discomfort, no adverse effects. Finally, Sophia was called. She approached the stand wearing Gabriel's prototype, moving with a naturalness that left the room silent. She didn't need the wheelchair for support. Her steps were firm, confident. Miss Albright, Dr. Augustus began gently, could you describe your experience with both pieces of equipment? Sophia took a deep breath. I used Tech Mobility's orthosis for 3 years. It's technologically impressive equipment, but it caused me constant pain. I tolerated it because I was told it was the best available. She paused, organizing her words. When Mr. Gabriel looked at me for the first time, he did something no expensive specialist had done. He asked me what I felt. Not what the data said, not what theory predicted. He asked about my pain. And did his device help? Sophia smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. For the first time in 11 years, I could walk without feeling like my body was fighting against the equipment. I could feel the ground beneath my feet. I could move like a person, not like a robot. Tech Mobility's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. Miss Albright, don't you think you're being a bit dramatic? After all, our equipment allowed you to have mobility when no other resource was available. Sophia stared at him firmly. I'm not being dramatic, I'm being honest. Your equipment gave me robotic mobility. Mr. Gabriel gave me my life back. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the judge seemed moved. No further questions, the lawyer murmured, returning to his seat. When Sophia stepped down from the stand, Gabriel saw Marina discreetly wiping away tears. Isabella, watching everything from the gallery, waved enthusiastically at her father. The judge called a 30-minute recess for deliberation. Everyone left for the hallway. Gabriel leaned against the wall, emotionally exhausted. You did very well, Marina said, approaching. I barely spoke. Exactly. You let your work speak for you. Dr. Augustus joined them. I think we have a good chance. The testimonies were solid, especially Sophia's. But while they waited, Gabriel noticed movement across the hallway. Dr. Hoffman was on the phone, his expression becoming progressively more tense. He ended the call abruptly, and gathered his lawyers in a closed circle. 10 minutes later, something unexpected happened. One of Tech Mobility's lawyers approached Dr. Augustus. "We would like to propose a settlement." Everyone looked surprised. Marina frowned. "What kind of settlement?" "We are willing to withdraw all charges against Mr. Stone. In exchange, we would like to license his technology to incorporate into our future products." Gabriel was speechless. "They want to buy my idea?" "Not buy," the lawyer corrected. "License. You would retain the rights and receive royalties. It's a generous offer." Dr. Augustus looked at Gabriel. "The decision is yours." Gabriel thought for a long moment. He looked at Sophia, who was watching him anxiously. He looked at Marina, who nodded slightly, indicating she would support any decision. He looked at Isabella, who held her drawing notebook against her chest. And then he thought of Raphael, of all the nights studying alone, of all the promises made, of all the other Raphaels and Sophias out there needing help. "No," Gabriel said calmly. The lawyer blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I will not license the technology to you." He pointed to Sophia. "You had years to help her and only caused her pain. I don't trust that you would use this in the right way." The lawyer turned red. "Mr. Stone, are you refusing an offer that could make you rich?" "I'm refusing an offer that would put this technology in the hands of those who don't truly care about the people who use it." Marina smiled widely. "In that case, Gabriel, how about we work together? Biogenesis can help you produce and distribute the device. No abusive contracts, no taking away your autonomy. A true partnership." Gabriel stared at her. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because you taught me something important. True innovation doesn't come from expensive labs. It comes from people who care enough not to give up." Tech Mobility's lawyer returned to his group, clearly frustrated. Minutes later, when everyone returned to the courtroom, they made a formal announcement. "Your Honor, after reconsideration, Tech Mobility International has decided to withdraw all charges." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? This means Mr. Stone is free of all allegations." "We are sure," the lawyer replied through gritted teeth. "Very well. Case closed." The gavel struck, and it was as if an enormous weight had been lifted from Gabriel's shoulders. Sophia ran and hugged him. Marina shook his hand firmly. Dr. Taylor and Dr. Beatrice congratulated him. Isabella jumped from the gallery and threw herself into her father's arms. "You won, Dad. You won." "No, Issa. We won. All of us." 6 months had passed since the day in court. St. Joseph's garage would never be the same, but not in the way Gabriel had imagined. The facade remained simple, the paint still peeling. But now there was a new sign beside the entrance: Gabriel Stone Mobility Center, a biogenesis partnership. The space had been expanded. Marina had invested in renovating the back area, transforming that improvised corner into a true biomechanics laboratory. But Gabriel had insisted on keeping the car repair business running. It was part of who he was, and he didn't want to forget his roots. Isabella ran through the door, her school uniform covered in paint splatters. She was now part of a robotics club at school and lived with project stains on her arms. "Dad, there's a huge line outside," she announced, breathless. Gabriel looked up from the workbench where he was adjusting an orthosis for a new patient. "A line?" "Of people wanting to know your work. Some people came from other states." He sighed, but it wasn't a sigh of frustration. It was one of accepted responsibility. "Can you ask them to wait? I need to finish here first." The person at the workbench was a 50-something man named Marcus, who had lost some mobility after complications from spinal surgery. He used crutches and an orthopedic brace that clearly bothered him. "How long did you say it takes to make one?" Marcus asked, watching Gabriel work. "It depends on each case. Each body is different, each need is unique. Generally between 2 to 3 weeks to develop and test properly." "And how much does it cost?" Gabriel paused, choosing his words carefully. "We work with a flexible pricing system. No one is turned away for not being able to pay. Marina and Biogenesis subsidize the cases that need it." Marcus had tears in his eyes. "You don't know what this means. I visited 5 specialized clinics. All of them gave me quotes I could never afford." "I know exactly what it means," Gabriel said gently, thinking of Raphael. "That's why I do what I do." Dr. Taylor entered through the back door, carrying a box of materials. He now dedicated 2 days a week to the center, supervising medical cases and ensuring everything was done with appropriate safety. "Gabriel, I just got a call from the State University. They want you to give a lecture to the biomedical engineering students." Gabriel turned pale. "Me? Give a lecture? Doctor, I don't even have a degree." "Exactly why they want you. Doctor, Beatrice is organizing everything. She thinks students need to understand that innovation comes from a different perspective, not just textbooks." "I don't know if I'm the right person for that." "You are the only right person," Sophia intervened, having just arrived with a box of sweets. She now volunteered at the center 3 times a week, helping new patients adapt to the devices. "You need to stop doubting yourself." Sophia was unrecognizable compared to the resigned young woman Gabriel had met 6 months ago. She moved with confidence, her eyes shining with purpose. She had started studying physiotherapy at the university, determined to help others like herself. Marina entered right behind her daughter, talking on the phone as always, but now with a more frequent smile on her face. She ended the call and approached the group. "Good news, I managed to approve a scholarship program for training biomechanics technicians. We're going to train people to do what Gabriel does." "But won't that decrease the demand for me?" Gabriel asked. "It will multiply the impact. Imagine 10 Gabriels, 20, 50, each one helping people in different parts of the country." Gabriel remained silent, absorbing the magnitude of what was happening. It had started as a promise made by a hospital bed. Now it was transforming into a movement. Isabella tugged at her father's sleeve. "The line is still waiting." All right, all right." Gabriel wiped his hands and went to the door. Outside, there really was a line. It wasn't just potential patients, but also students, curious journalists, and even other mechanics who wanted to learn. Gabriel felt momentarily overwhelmed. Marina placed her hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to see everyone today. We'll set up a proper appointment system." But looking at those people, Gabriel saw faces he knew well. Faces marked by hope mixed with skepticism, by years of unfulfilled promises, by pain that no one else seemed to take seriously. He saw Raphael in each of them. "I'll talk to everyone, at least today, even if it's just for 5 minutes." And so he did. He spent the next few hours talking, listening to stories, making preliminary assessments, scheduling follow-ups. Dr. Taylor helped him with medical questions. Sophia and Isabella kept everyone organized and comfortable. When the last visitor finally left, it was already night. Gabriel sat on the workbench, exhausted but satisfied. Isabella brought him a glass of water. "Dad, do you realize you've changed a lot of people's lives?" "I'm still processing it all, Isa." Marina and Sophia were getting ready to leave when Marina stopped and turned back. "Gabriel, I need to tell you something." He looked at her, curious. "When Sophia had the accident, I thought my life was over. The guilt was so immense that I buried myself in work, spent fortunes looking for solutions, did everything I could, but nothing really worked because I was trying to buy redemption." She paused, emotional. "You showed me that it's not about money or expensive technology. It's about truly seeing people, about genuinely caring." Gabriel didn't know what to say. Marina continued. "Sophia is happy. Truly happy. Not just because she can walk, but because she has purpose. She wants to help others now. And that started because you asked a simple question. Is your orthosis too tight? Sometimes the simple questions are the most important," Gabriel said. After they left, Gabriel was alone in the garage with Isabella. The girl was drawing in her notebook, as always. He approached and saw that she had created a series of illustrations showing the entire journey, from the day the Mercedes broke down to that moment. "This is for my science project," Isabella explained, about how observation and empathy are just as important as technical knowledge. Gabriel sat beside her. "You know, none of this would have happened if your mom hadn't taught me never to give up on studying." Isabella nodded. "Mom would be proud of you, and Uncle Raphael too." Gabriel looked at the framed photo of Raphael. Would he have approved of all this? Sometimes he wondered if he was truly keeping the promise in the right way. As if reading his thoughts, Isabella said, "You promised you wouldn't let people lose hope. Look around, Dad. This garage is full of hope now. She was right. Gabriel could feel it. In the tools hanging on the walls, in the prototypes at different stages of development, in the handwritten thank you notes that arrived almost daily. But there was a constant reminder of humility. Not all cases were successful. Some people needed solutions he couldn't yet provide. Some conditions were too complex for his current methods, and he accepted that because he knew it wasn't about being perfect, it was about trying. In the following weeks, Gabriel did indeed give the lecture at the university. He was nervous, stammered a few times, but the students listened with reverent attention. At the end, a young woman raised her hand. "Mr. Stone, what advice would you give to someone who wants to innovate but doesn't have the traditional credentials?" Gabriel thought carefully before answering. "Don't let the lack of a degree stop you from learning. Don't let the establishment convince you that your ideas are worthless just because you came from outside. But most importantly, always remember that you are working for real people with real pain. That will keep you humble and focused on what truly matters." The applause was deafening. Months turned into a year. The Gabriel Stone Mobility Center now served over 50 people a month. Marina had expanded the scholarship program, and 3 technicians had already been trained, opening satellite centers in other cities. Gabriel still fixed cars in the mornings. He still studied late. But now he had a team, he had resources, and most importantly, he had a network of people who believed in what he did. On a special Saturday afternoon, they organized a celebration at the center. Patients, volunteers, partners all gathered. There was a huge cake and simple decorations, but the atmosphere was filled with genuine joy. Sophia made a toast. "To the man who gave me my life back. To the man who proved that miracles don't require expensive degrees, only hearts willing to care." Gabriel blushed with the attention, but Isabella nudged him forward. "Say something, Dad." He looked at all those faces. He saw Marcus, who now walked without crutches. He saw Mrs. Grace, a 70-year-old lady who had returned to tending her garden. He saw Peter, a teenager who had regained the confidence to play soccer. "When my brother Raphael made me promise that I wouldn't let people lose hope, I thought it would be something personal, small, but you all transformed it into something much bigger." Gabriel felt his voice waver. "Every person here is proof that it's worth believing. It's worth trying. It's worth not accepting that the impossible is the end of the story." The applause echoed through the garage. Isabella hugged her father tightly. Marina discreetly wiped away tears. Dr. Taylor and Dr. Beatrice exchanged satisfied glances. Later, when everyone had left and the garage had returned to silence, Gabriel walked to the back workbench. He picked up Raphael's photo and held it for a long moment. "I think I did it, bro. I think I really did it." Isabella appeared beside him, sleepy but happy. "Did what, Dad?" "Kept my promise, and discovered that sometimes the way to honor those we've lost is to help those who are still here." They went up together to the apartment above the garage. Gabriel turned off the lights, but left a small lamp lit on the workbench, as he always did. Because you never knew when an idea would strike, when a solution would appear, when someone would need help. St. Joseph's Garage, which had started as a humble business to support a family, had transformed into a beacon of hope. And Gabriel Stone, the mechanic who had never finished college, had proven that knowledge doesn't just come from degrees, but from dedication. That innovation doesn't require expensive laboratories but careful observation, and that miracles happen when skillful hands meet determined hearts. Outside, the city continued its frantic pace, but within those simple walls, something extraordinary had blossomed, a place where pain was taken seriously, where hope was nurtured, where every person who walked through the door knew they would be seen, heard, and valued. And it had all begun with a broken car, a tight orthosis, and the courage to ask a simple question when all the specialists had stopped asking. In bed before falling asleep, Isabella murmured, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you." Gabriel smiled in the dark. "No, Isa, you're going to be better, because you'll have what I didn't. Encouragement from an early age, opportunities, and someone who believes in you from the start." "But I already have that, Dad. Always have." And as Isabella fell asleep, Gabriel stayed awake a little longer, staring at the ceiling. He thought of Raphael, of Sophia, of all those yet to come. He thought of how a single moment, A single decision, not to ignore someone's pain, could change so many destinies. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about being human. It was about seeing suffering and deciding to do something about it, even when you didn't have all the answers, even when the world said you weren't qualified. And perhaps, Gabriel thought, that was the true lesson. That anyone, no matter how humble their origin, can make a difference. You just have to be willing to try. You just have to care enough not to give up. With that comforting thought, Gabriel finally closed his eyes and slept, ready to wake up the next day and continue doing what he had promised, to give hope to those who had lost it, one step at a time. End of story. If the journey of Gabriel, Sophia, and Isabella touched your heart, know that there is always hope where there is a will to make a difference. Every challenge overcome in this story reminds us that true innovation comes from empathy, persistence, and the courage to question the established. If you are moved by this story of overcoming and determination, leave your comment telling us which moment touched you the most. Subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. And don't forget to leave your like so that more people can be inspired by this message of hope. After all, as we learned from Gabriel, small actions can change entire destinies. Until the next story.